Well, on July 3rd, late morning July 3rd, a report came in of an entangled humpback whale that was near Monterey Bay. And the initial team to go out was from Marine Life Studies. They had a very good photographer on board by the name of Doug Croft, and they started to get the initial photographs of the entanglement, and it showed to be a pretty serious entanglement, something that had been on for a while. The ropes started to embed into the back of the animal. It was cutting into the mouth. The line clearly came over the head, just behind the blowhole, in one side of the mouth, out the other side of the mouth, and then around a pectoral fin, and it was dragging behind. The animal was clearly trying to get rid of the gear, but in that effort, it was just making the situation worse. I think the animal was dragging a lot of gear, and the weight of that gear as the animal was breaching, trying to get out of it, was simply cinching it up more and doing more damage. Well, they saw the animal, they documented it, we decided that we had to have a response, which meant the first phase of the response is we want to get telemetry on it so we can keep track of where it's going. And so we called for support from the Coast Guard, the Motor Lifeboat Station there in Monterey, and they agreed to come out because we had it well documented, they've been trained on it, and so they had our level 3 responder come down to meet up with them. We transferred the gear. They're starting to come out. Peggy Stapp's crew from Marine Life Studies is on the animal, watching it, and lo and behold, somebody in an open boat with 3 adults and 4 kids comes over to get a close look at the whale. And so this open boat of 3 adults, none of them wearing life jackets, 3 kids, come over because they want to get their little whale watch in. Consequently, they wrap their propeller in the trailing gear off the entangled animal. It starts to tow their boat backwards, and they're taking on water over the transom. They go into a panic mode and yelling for help and so on and so forth. And Peggy calls the Coast Guard on 16 saying we've got the situation where this whale has now gotten itself hooked up to a public boat that's out there, and now they're being towed backwards. So our MLB, the Coast Guard, was coming out with our gear, and they immediately had to go back, get our equipment and our people off, because now it's become a SAR mission, a search and rescue mission. And so they go back and they take all the gear off, and they start to come out, and by that time, the guys who got themselves hung up in the whale reached over the back and got their boat disentangled, and they sped off because they knew the Coast Guard was coming out. And so we called off the SAR mission, so then the Coast Guard had to go back to get the deployment gear, and our crew that was part of the deployment team. And all this time, Peggy's crew is standing by on the animal, waiting for the disentanglement crew to come out with, and it was just snake bit from the start. Well, Coast Guard finally comes out. It's starting to get dark. It's, I believe it's getting foggy as well. And they were able to successfully deploy our deployment buoy, the big orange thing that has the telemetry on it. And we were planning on coming back the next day. We got word that the telemetry was working. All of our stations that received the telemetry knew exactly where the whale was. And so the next day, we get the whole team together again, Marine Life Studies, Alaska Whale Foundation, sanctuary people. So we're all ready to go. The ping is showing us that our whale is off of Point Sur. It's gone way down south. So now we've got to move all of our assets to go way down the coast to try to find it. Now our Argos system, we have a delay. The way the Argos works is when the whale comes up to the surface, if it stays long enough at the surface for the telemetry buoy to be floating at the surface, then it's got to happen at the same time that there's a satellite coming over the top. And so if the surfacing and the satellite happen at the same time, we get an upload of the information of where the animal is. Then that information goes to, I think, someplace in Africa or France, and then somebody at that end cleans up the data and then posts it on the internet to where we then go to our account to figure out where the animal is. And so there's the delay of 20 minutes or so before we get that. And meanwhile, our animal's moving. So we're getting these fixes and we're getting a sense of where the animal is. To zero in on the animal, we use a VHF antenna to find out where it is in that moment, as opposed to waiting 20 minutes for the Argos information. The problem with the VHF is that if you start getting a ping, we'll use the antenna, well, as a flat antenna, will go like this. And when we start to get a ping, it could be that direction, or it could be exactly behind us. So we're using two antennas, and we're trying to triangulate. And so we're having a heck of a time finding out where this animal is. And one of the confounding things is that there are a dozen blue whales down there. There's 50 or 60 humpback whales, and we stopped counting at that amount, and probably more. There were fin whales down there. There are all sorts of critters down there feeding. And so we're trying to get a deep, 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 deep ping coming off this whale with all these other whales. And, you might have several of them surfacing. So we've got two fairly substantial boats out there all trying to find out where this dang thing went. Well, late in the day, late in the afternoon, we finally find it. We know exactly where it is. We're on the animal. We launch our boat, and we go up on it. In the boat is Jim Holm, Ryan Berger, and myself. And we get up on the animal, and we find out there is just this immense wad of crap underneath the animal. That it wasn't just going around the mouth and around the flipper. Underneath it, it was all tangled and wrapped around, and it's just literally hundreds of feet of line and buoys and all sorts of stuff. So when we respond on these things, we have attainable goals that we set for the time period that we have. We don't say we're going to go disentangle that animal no matter what. We make very defined goals. We are going to do this at this point, this at this point, so on and so forth, and we do it in steps. What that does is that forces us to check our safety levels, our enthusiasm level. When you're out on the cut boat, you got to be really even emotionally, because if somebody gets too excited, no, we got to go save this thing. You end up with a loss of situational awareness, and that's when you end up with problems. So we come back to report to everybody on the boat, and we're saying this is what we're seeing, but it's starting to get dark. And do we do something, or do we have to leave it and come back another day? Well, the two people in charge, Chris, who's the master of Fulmar, and myself, say, we put so much effort in getting out here. We have all our safety stuff in gear. Homer, myself, Chris, Marshall, all of us have had night operations training, so we know what we're doing. We've got reflectives all over the boat, and we say, you know what, we ought to give it another shot. Marshall offered me a headlamp, and I said, I don't want that. I want to have all my peripheral vision. So as long as we've got twilight, I want to be able to see it. And so the goal was simply to get rid of the crap underneath the animal. And so we go out there and we attach to the animal. We're coming over the bow, and the animal is still pretty darn healthy, even though the animal wasn't very old, and it is all tangled up. Boy, those puppies are strong. And so we're holding down on the animal on the bow so we can work ourselves up to it so we can get access to where all the crap is. And several times the animal dove and it swamped our boat to where it just completely filled up with water, because we were hoping to keep the animal near the surface. And so when that happened, we had to let go and then do a little circle with the engine to get the water out and then get back up on it. And so we were finally to advance our floats enough where we could cut away all of the crap, so that the only thing that was left was the mouth, the flipper, one line that was loose, and one line that had our telemetry buoy on it. So we had taken off 200 pounds worth of crap, I think, maybe. But we kept flotation on one line, hoping that it would pull it through. And then we went home. That was 4th of July. That was the second operational period. And so as we're going home, fireworks are going off. We could all watch it in the distance, so we had our fireworks for the 4th of July. And so we get back to Monterey, and the guys on Fulmar allowed us to stay overnight, and so the next morning we're out there. We've got the Argo system working, and we find it right away. We know exactly where it was. We go out there, and we get on it, but trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And so we started to do the more advanced analysis. In the second operational period, it was too dark for us to get any pictures underwater. So on this third operational period, we needed to get a thorough understanding of exactly how severe the entanglement was. And so during the day, the animal was just frustrating us because it was feeding while we were trying to do that. It was also somewhat curious in what we were doing. We've got a video in which we're on the animal, we're holding on to it, we've moved up onto the flukes, and we've got our underwater camera on it, and the animal dives down and then comes up, and you can see the animal looking at us. He just comes up and he takes a look at us, and then he rolls forward and he keeps going. So we're attached to the animal at this time. So by attached, I mean that we're holding on to our working, what we call our working line, while the animal does what it's doing. And Ryan was the point person at the time, and so he's trying to get an angle on it and so on and so forth. And so we're photographing from Fulmar, and this animal starts to circle back onto our response boat, and then starts to lunge feed right at our boat. And so the animal's trying to be a whale while we're trying to help it, and it's got this line across its mouth, and it's dragging all this crap still. And so, we're just trying to figure out, all right, mouth entanglements are the hardest ones to deal with because the whale's not going to let us get up close. And so we have a technique where we use pressic loops with the flotation so that we can work ourselves up because we know exactly what the danger zone is, and so we can control it right up to the edge of that danger zone and still be in a safe situation. And so there were a couple times where the animal actually tried to lash out at us and got us all wet, but we were still in a safe zone. So we knew we were operating within our own defined parameters of safety. But this animal just then would go down and come back and feed, and go down and come back and feed. And so late in that operational period, we decide that probably the best thing we can do is reduce the entanglement, hoping that there will only be a slight wrap around the right side of the animal with the telemetry buoy on the other side, hoping that it would be loosened up so it would be pulled through by the next day. Because we've had several entanglements in which just the presence of our telemetry buoy is enough to pull all the crap off. So Chris calls around trying to find a place to park Fulmar because it was a long way from, we were up Half Moon Bay at that point. It was a long run to get back to Monterey. And so the harbor master gave us a place in Pillar Point. And so we got in there 9:30 or so, and Ryan, Homer, and I are just dead tired. It's the second operational period. And so we're done, and we're just kind of sitting in the salon, kind of looking like death warmed over. And Aaron, who was part of the Fulmar crew, said, "All right, what do you guys want to eat?" And we're saying, "Whatever, just get it." So she goes off to Safeway and gets us salads and burritos and sandwich makings and all sorts of stuff. And so we go to bed. We're dead tired. Wake up refreshed. I mean, when you're dead tired like that, you sleep really hard, and so you wake up really well. So we're starting our fourth operational period, and we find the animal. We're starting to get really good at finding this guy very quickly. We immediately go out, we find it, and so we're on it. We get out there, and we attach to the animal, and we find out that where we had made the cut had moved up on the animal about 5 or 6 feet, and we're thinking, holy shitskis, that idea of using the flotation might be enough to pull it off. So if it worked that much, perhaps hooking the boat to the whale will add more flotation to help pull it off. And so we did that. And when I say hooking up, what we did is we took one of our our buoys, and we had it over the bow of the boat. And for about the first hour, Ryan was holding on to it, thinking that he would hold on to the whale. And I said, Ryan, you're going to be so tired here if you keep that up. And so we had the buoy over the bow, and I wedged it with my knee so that if the animal dove, all we had to do was kick it over and we'd be good to go. And so the animal is towing us along at 4.5, 5 knots. Not for 10 minutes, not for a half hour, not for an hour, but 3 or 4 hours. Just continually doing this. And we're saying, all right, when is this going to be resolved? So we've tried a number of techniques. We even brought up the fulmar, come up close to the animal to kind of see if we could get the whale to move. And imagine the situation: we have our boat attached to the whale that's going in this direction, and the entanglement is all on the right side of the head. So what we want to have happen is we want the animal to move away so that the line opens up, so we can then have a chance to go at it, to cut it farther up forward. So I call in fulmar to come in closer and get off our quarter, hoping that the noise of the fulmar will cause the animal to move away from the fulmar. That doesn't happen. What does the whale do? The whale turns into the fulmar and crosses its bow to where our support crew on fulmar is looking over the front, and they've got this look of the whale. They can see exactly what's going on. They can see the degree of the entanglement. What had happened was the line, as it was coming out of the left side of the mouth, was being pressed against one of the nares to the point where it had become very swollen and it could breathe only out of one of the nares. And so obviously it was a situation that was not going to resolve on itself. So over the next few hours, Ryan and I discussed what we should do next. And we decided that what we needed to do was give the animal the best chance and try to remove as much of the entanglement as we could. I mean, we'd already gotten rid of 95% of it, and so we wanted to go that extra little bit where the only part that was still on the animal was the wrap around the pack and what went through the mouth. Anything trailing would be cut as close to the animal as we could. And so we did that. We hooked up the knife, put the pole out at 35 feet, and walked ourselves up as close to the animal as we felt we could do. And we moved before we did the cut, we wanted to make sure this animal wasn't going to freak out at us. And so we did some sensitization in which we took the pole and we would tap it on the back to see what the reaction was. And the first one was get a little bit of a buck. And the second time the animal actually turned around and kind of take a look at us and said, okay, what is this? And then we'd give it a while and then touch it again to the point where the animal wouldn't react at all. And so at that point, we figured it would be safe to go ahead and make the cut. And so we moved the knife up and moved it up just above the pectoral fin on the line that was kind of going over. I actually went under the pec and then up over the back. And we went up to where the pectoral fin, we were able to get the knife underneath it, pull it out, and we cut it. And the animal bolted. And again, all this while, I think the slowest the animal went was 3.5 knots. We're talking about 10 hours on the water. And so we finally cut it free and it took off. And so what we did was we gave the animal the best chances for survival, that now that there was no drag on the line, that this line should have started to relax. Through the healing process, when you get a splinter, the splinter kind of moves to the out. We would hope that would happen with the whale also. And so what we believe is that because the animal was so strong when we left it, and because there was no more drag on it, we felt that it would eventually resolve itself.